A lot of bounce back performances from last week's buy lows, but there's still a couple guys out there that we can hunt at bargain bin price tags. Today, we're going to be breaking down 5 buy lows at the wide receiver position, 3 sell highs at the wide receiver position, as I always do every single week. Danny will have you covered for running backs later on in today's video. But without further ado, let's get right into it. All right, let's kick things off by looking at last week's trade targets. Jamar Chase was really the only guy that got the grease of the squeaky wheels last week, but Jalen Waddle, Garrett Wilson, Christian Watson, and Chris Godwin are also all still very viable buy lows. I won't be rehashing their arguments again in this video, but all of those guys are decent buy lows as well. I actually personally made a trade for Garrett Wilson. Me and one of my buddies decided to swap out Jets for Jets, so I traded him Breece Hall. He was, completely devoid of running backs. I just lost Mike Williams, and I already have a decent running back core, so I trade him Breece Hall for Garrett Wilson there, and I get Algier, and he gets Downs on the way back. So I'm personally out here making some trades on the guys that I'm telling you guys to trade for. But the first guy that we're actually going to break down in today's video is Calvin Ridley, and in my opinion, he's easily the number one buy low in all of fantasy right now, let alone at the wide receiver position. So let's start by defining what exactly Calvin Ridley is, because that's how we get to these buy lows, right? We define what they are. What is their market value? Is it less than what they are? Is it more than what they are? That gets you to a buy low or a sell high. So with Calvin Ridley, we know this guy is an alpha wide receiver 1. He's getting the target share he needs to get. He has the big play upside. He has the talent level to finish as a top 5 fantasy receiver. We've seen it before. But uncharacteristically, this guy's dropped 4 passes right now. He leads the NFL in drops. He's in a top 12 offense, which should be a top 5 to 10 offense once they figure their shit out. And they can absolutely scorch the earth down the stretch. Trevor Lawrence is still playing at a decently high level. He's a third-rated quarterback on PFF right now. They're top 15 in neutral pass rate, according to Hayden Winks, our friend over at Underdog Fantasy. And they're 9th in fantasy usage to the wide receiver position are the Jacksonville Jaguars. Calvin Ridley is wide receiver 17 in half PPR point per game usage right now, wide receiver 12 in PPR point per game usage, yet he's ranking outside the top 24 wide receivers, outside the top 35 wide receivers in actual fantasy production. So if you have Calvin Ridley, he's a firm hold. He's going to bounce back. He's still a mid-wide receiver, low-end wide receiver 1 rest of season. And in my opinion, you guys should be sending out tons of offers for Calvin Ridley to try and buy him at these ridiculously low prices right now. If you can get Calvin Ridley per the Yahoo Trade Finder here for Miles Sanders or Alvin Kamara, or, you can get Calvin Ridley and Breece Hall, who are both 2 really good buy low candidates right now for Aaron Jones and Jordan Addison. I'd even be willing to throw in a third player on top of that to get that done. Terry McLaurin and Javonte Williams were sold for Calvin Ridley. Deontay Johnson, Damian Pierce for Calvin Ridley. Cooper Kupp and Khalil Herbert for Calvin Ridley and Josh Jacobs. You guys get the point. He is one of the best buy lows in fantasy. It looks like the market is viewing this guy as like a mid to low end wide receiver 2 and not the mid to high end wide receiver 1 upside that he has, probably low end wide receiver 1 projection that we could have for him going forward. So send out some offers for Calvin Ridley, and also send out some offers for CeeDee Lamb, who is the other high end buy of this week's video, because a lot of them, like I said, were talked about in last week's video. CeeDee Lamb has not scored a touchdown yet, so obvious touchdown regression coming for him, and the Cowboys season has been kind of wonky so far. Obviously, they crushed the Giants in week 1, they crushed the Jets in week 2, and then in week 3, they kind of get surprised by the Arizona Cardinals, but now they should have some games coming up on their schedule where they're going to need Dak and CeeDee Lamb to show up. The Patriots, the 49ers, Chargers, Rams, and Eagles, all of those games should be competitive. I don't expect the Cowboys to blow those guys out. CeeDee Lamb has very solid usage. It's pretty much what we expected heading into the season for CeeDee Lamb. The fantasy points, the touchdowns, and the big plays just haven't really come yet for him. He's getting the targets. He has the opportunity in an offense that projects to be pretty solid. They just haven't quite played to that level yet. And I think knowing that they have some better offenses that they're going up against them in the coming weeks should probably have to elevate the play of the Cowboys offense. And right now you can trade for CeeDee Lamb using guys like Kyron Williams or Aaron Jones or, DK Metcalf, Isaiah Pacheco, plus a random piece like Josh Reynolds, or Josh Jacobs and George Pickens, Aaron Jones and Michael Pittman, Amari Cooper and DeAndre Swift for CeeDee Lamb and Brandon Ayuk. Again, you guys get the point. CeeDee Lamb is definitely being valued right now as like a mid wide receiver 2 instead of the mid wide receiver 1 that he actually is. So go out and send some offers for him. Next, we're going to get into a couple of guys that are a little bit more low end. So if you guys are in need of depth, or if you're in need of maybe some upside down the stretch because you're already 2-1 or you're already 3-0, these guys will absolutely apply to you. So Zay Flowers is the first one we're going to talk about. In my opinion, I think we're in a perfect window to go and get Zay Flowers, because I think the casuals are going to start to realize that, week one, it was, we look like we have a league winner on our hands. Zay Flowers had a monster week one performance, but then the narrative was, well, let's see what happens when Mark Andrews is back. And since Mark Andrews has been back, Zay Flowers hasn't quite produced yet. But what I do know about Zay Flowers is that he ranks wide receiver 20 in expected half PPR points per game, but he is actually the wide receiver 37 in his actual fantasy production. So with Zay Flowers, you're getting a guy that's due for some positive regression. He's clearly the number one of this team. He's running 93, 87, and 100% of the routes in the first 3 games of his rookie season. Again, I got to remind you that this guy's a rookie wide receiver, and he ranks top 25 in PFF receiving grade. He has a 33% target share. When we know that rookies tend to get better as the season goes along, what we've seen from Zay Flowers is nothing short of spectacular so far. Buy him before his price goes up, because the second he has a monster game, it's going to be, this guy's a top 20 receiver for the rest of the season. But right now, the narrative that your league mate that rosters Zay Flowers might be thinking is, oh, I don't know if this guy can produce while Mark Andrews is healthy. So take advantage of that narrative. Go out and buy Zay Flowers for, sell high on Raheem Mostert to get Zay Flowers and Jalen Warren, or sell high on Isaiah Pacheco or Brian Robinson, or, Khalil Herbert or Jordan Addison or TJ Hawkinson for Zay Flowers and Jahmyr Gibbs. All of those trades that I'm giving you guys as an example of definitely make sense as the type of appropriate value for Zay Flowers. He's like a back-end wide receiver 2 in fantasy for me rest of the season, and he's available right now for like mid wide receiver 3 price tags. So you're getting a sizable discount on him. Jahan Dotson is the next guy that we're going to talk about, especially if you guys are in a deeper league format. Jahan Dotson is one of my favorite buy lows right now. He's one of these buy lows, though, that I can't really point to one thing that tells me he's a good buy, because his fantasy usage isn't quite up to snuff for what his talent level would dictate. This offense actually ranks second in pass rate over expected, so we are seeing them throw the ball a little bit more, but they're still operating at a relatively slow pace, ranking bottom 5 in the NFL in pace of play. Sam Howell is also kind of spreading the ball out a little bit more, way more than I expected so far, with Jahan Dotson posting a 17% target share on the season. Terry McLaurin is only at an 18% target share, which would also rank pretty much the lowest in his entire career. I think those things should correct themselves. We should probably get those two guys combining for close to 50% of the Washington Commanders' targets. And I think when they look back at their destruction at the hands of the Buffalo Bills last week, the new game plan will be, we need to get the ball in the hands of Terry McLaurin and Jahan Dotson, because that hasn't happened enough going forward, and maybe they'll scheme up those guys some more touches. Jahan Dotson has been pretty bad so far. There's a chance he might even be available on your waiver wire if you're in a shallow league. So definitely send out some feelers for him. It should not cost you very much. If you guys are in a 3 wide receiver 2 flex type of league, or a 2 wide receiver 2 flex type of league, full PPR, I think Jahan Dotson's the perfect guy to go after, because I do think rest of season he's a top 45, top 40 wide receiver that can fit into your lineup in good matchups, and you can get him right now. Jahan Dotson and George Kittle were acquired for Michael Pittman. Jahan Dotson and Joe Mixon were acquired for Jerry Jeudy and Jerome Ford. Joshua Palmer was sold for Jahan Dotson as well. Kadarius Toney was sold for Jahan Dotson. Pretty much anybody that's like a fringe rosterable player, you can go after Jahan Dotson with, because he's not really highly valued by the person that drafted him at this point in time. So the final buy low of this video is going to be Jaxon Smith-Njigba. And this one, especially, if you guys are 0-3 or if you're 1-2, don't just ignore this one. You can skip ahead in this video if you want to. But for those of you guys that are 3-0 or 2-1, and you're, one of the highest scoring teams in your league, and maybe you're in a shallow league and you're just kind of looking for upside on your bench for a potential playoff run, JSN is simply too talented to continue producing at the level he's producing right now. He's not getting the routes. He's not getting the snaps necessary to make a big impact. The Seahawks, surprisingly, are only running 11 personnel 57% of the time, which is odd considering I would probably rank them as the best wide receiver trio in the entire NFL. So they should be living out of 11 personnel in my opinion. But if you guys buy JSN to stash on your bench, you're simply buying into these key principles when you're buying into JSN. Number one, JSN was the best wide receiver prospect, or at least one of the best wide receiver prospects in this NFL draft. Most people thought he was the best one. Rookie wide receivers is the other principle that you're buying into. They tend to scale production as the season goes along. So just because, Tank Dell and Jordan Addison and Zay Flowers and some of these guys are producing right out of the gate, doesn't mean that all receivers are going to do that. And the fact that JSN hasn't done that means he's a bust, because JSN is in a much more crowded receiver core than those other guys are. And I do expect him to continue getting better as the season goes along. And so far, he hasn't been bad. 18% targets per route run. The only real issue for JSN is that he's not getting really any targets down the field. His air yard share is like comparable to like Rondale Moore's and Kadarius Toney's. So we need to see more usage downfield from JSN. And if I were you guys and I was 3-0 or 2-1, send out some offers. That depth wide receiver 6 that's on your roster, like Tutu Atwell or Romeo Doubs, or who's never going to see the light of day in your starting lineup, see if you can swap that 1-for-1 for JSN, because it probably will be easy to do because JSN hasn't really done much, but you also want to stash that upside down the stretch for the fantasy playoffs. Post Seahawks bye week, they should see a big time uptick in usage. And right now you can get JSN and Elijah Mitchell for Nico Collins, or you can get JSN and Sutton for Alexander Madison, or JSN straight up for Jaden Reed, for Romeo Doubs, who I mentioned as well. So those are my buys of the week. Now let's get into the sell highs at the wide receiver position. And as I say every single week, just because somebody is a sell high on this list doesn't mean that I think they're terrible. I think why they're sell highs is because your individual league market may overvalue these players. So if we have a wide receiver 3 coming off of 2 great weeks, your league market might think they're suddenly a wide receiver 2 rest of season, or a top 15 wide receiver rest of season. So if they don't think that, obviously just hold the players I'm about to talk about. But whenever you have the chance to upgrade from a wide receiver 2 profile to a wide receiver 1 profile, or a wide receiver 3 profile to a wide receiver 2 profile, just by happenstance, because the wide receiver 3 profile has had 2 good weeks and the wide receiver 2 profiles had 2 down weeks, then you always have to take those opportunities when they present themselves to you. And of course, rest of season rankings updates are live in our rest of season rankings on our site. So if you want access to our rest of season rankings, you can see who exactly is a wide receiver 2 archetype, who exactly is a wide receiver 3 archetype. You can get that by checking out the pinned comment. There's one of 2 ways that you can do it. But the first sell high that we're going to talk about is Deebo Samuel. And as I said in week 1, when Brandon Ayuk was the one coming off of monster performance, this 49ers offense will have somebody go off every single week. They're simply too good to have everybody disappoint. I know it's a crowded room. We have Deebo, we have Kittle, we have McCaffrey, and we have Ayuk. These guys are all very fantasy relevant players, and somebody, if not 2 people every single week, are going to have like a meh/down performance. But with Brandon Ayuk out last game, we saw all of these guys crush. McCaffrey crushed, Kittle crushed, Deebo crushed. And Deebo is the same wide receiver 2 profile that he's always been. He's not any better than he was before. The only difference is he's had a couple good games in a row. So if you can get a wide receiver 1 profile like Calvin Ridley, like CeeDee Lamb, like Jalen Waddle, like A.J. Brown, like Amon-Ra St. Brown, somebody like that, even if it costs you Deebo Plus to get to those guys, then I would absolutely be doing it. Or maybe you can sell them for an RB1 profile if you need if you're in need of a running back. Travis Etienne or Tony Pollard or maybe Ramondre Stevenson Plus is something that you can get back in exchange for Deebo Samuel. So right now, I mean, you can sell Deebo and Breece Hall for Tony Pollard, or Deebo and Etienne for Tyreek Hill plus a piece, or Deebo for Gibbs straight up, or Deebo for Tyler Lockett and T. Higgins, who's also a pretty good buy low at this point in time. So Deebo Samuel, see what he can fetch you on the open market. If nobody's biting, of course, you can just hold on to him as the wide receiver 2 that he is, but definitely see if he is overvalued in your individual league. Next, we get into Courtland Sutton, and Sutton has actually been the number 1 receiver of the Broncos so far this year. And even though they're 0-3, I've actually been kind of impressed with what the Denver Broncos have done. They're a top 10 fantasy usage team for wide receivers right now. Jerry Jeudy is now just working himself back from a hamstring injury, and Marvin Mims, who's the rookie that they drafted in the 2nd round, is starting to get more and more snaps along the way, and he's playing at a super high level as well. So with Courtland Sutton, I don't expect this like 27 and 29% target share that he's had the last 2 games to keep up. I think Jeudy has vastly outproduced him anytime they've been on the field together. And I think Marvin Mims is a real threat to his target share as well. So I think this offense will eventually kind of balance itself out. They'll all have their weeks here and there, but I actually do think Jeudy will end up being the number 1 at some point. So with Courtland Sutton, if you can sell him for like wide receiver 2 or wide receiver 3, high-end wide receiver 3 type of value, then you absolutely have to take the chance there. He's the perfect guy to package with, let's say, Kyron Williams and go out and get a wide receiver 1 like Calvin Ridley, or go out and get a running back 1 like Travis Etienne. Right now, you can trade Courtland Sutton Sutton and Rachaad White for T. Higgins, or you can trade Courtland Sutton and Rachaad White for Calvin Ridley, or you can trade Courtland Sutton straight up for Devon Achane or for Brian Robinson, or Courtland Sutton, DeAndre Hopkins, and James Conner to get to CeeDee Lamb and Dameon Pierce, or Courtland Sutton straight up for a stud tight end like Mark Andrews or TJ Hawkinson. So if you have Courtland Sutton, definitely go out and send some offers. Not all of these will be relevant. Not all of these will be possible in your given league. It's up to you guys as the listeners to kind of determine what might work in your league with what I'm talking about here. But the overarching theme here is that Courtland Sutton's probably overvalued, and you want to see what you can get for him on the open market depending on your individual team needs. Because if Courtland Sutton is your wide receiver 6 and he's been sitting on your bench this whole time, then package him with another bench piece of yours or maybe one of your starters and go out and get an elite value over replacement level stud for your starting lineup. So Adam Thielen is the last sell high that we're going to talk about. His usage is actually good. That's not why I'm selling him. I want to sell Adam Thielen because he's Adam Thielen. He's old. He plays for the Carolina Panthers. I just really don't buy into the fact that he's going to have this like career resurgence all season. He's running routes. He's getting targets. That's definitely not an issue for me, but he's older. He's injury prone. He's on a bottom 5 NFL offense. So if you can use Adam Thielen, again, like Courtland Sutton, as a bench piece maybe for you and package him with like a Kyren Williams or even Courtland Sutton himself or someone performing well right now to get up to a true difference maker like Calvin Ridley or a true difference maker like Garrett Wilson or Jalen Waddle or Christian Watson or something like that, then I would absolutely be willing to do it. So if you can sell Adam Thielen, Nico Collins, and Devon Achane for Calvin Ridley, I think you got to do it. If you can sell Thielen for Madison straight up, he's not really a difference maker, but he's a decent option if you guys are in need of an RB2. Those are the types of moves I'm looking to make with some of these sell high candidates, 2-for-1 upgrades, guys that you can go from, bench players or wide receiver 3 flex options to a solidified starter with an additional piece added into the fold. So if you guys enjoyed this video, if you got some value from it, if I gave you guys some ideas to send out some offers, leave a like down below, subscribe to the channel if you guys are new around here. About 75-80% of you guys that are watching these videos are not subscribed. It's totally free, doesn't cost you anything, and we really, really appreciate it. So go ahead and hit the subscribe button if you enjoyed. Also, be sure to check out our rest of season rankings. Our dynasty rankings are going through a big time overhaul, big time update this week. All that is available on flockfantasy.com. You can get access to our bonus content as well as all of your favorite dynasty creators, all of your favorite redraft creators like Mason, like Pierre and Chris over at Fantasy Endgame, Zach and bdge over at Fantasyland. The Fantasy and Dynasty domain guys also just joined the site with us recently, so you can go over to Flock Fantasy, use the promo code FSE for 30% off, and you'll get access to our content, their rankings, their bonus stuff, as well as everything that we are doing. The Dynasty Rankings Manifesto 2.0 is going over a big-time overhaul coming in this week, so definitely pay attention to that. If you guys want access to our weekly rankings and our rest of season rankings, you can also get them by going to Underdog Fantasy, signing up using the promo code FSE and getting 100% back up to $500 for a limited time. So if you put in $20, you'll get $40. If you put in $250, you'll get $500 on the site to play with. Definitely keep that in mind if you guys want to get some skin in the game on the NFL season this year. But with that being said, peace out, and we'll talk to you soon.